They replaced him with the CEO's daughter. 12 years of flawless code, erased for a fresher face. But Damon Ellis didn't leave quietly. He left behind a failsafe and invisible kill switch buried deep inside the $850 million system he built from the ground up. When they tried to take what was his, the system didn't crash, it vanished. Now, as Nexura Labs collapses under the weight of its betrayal, Damon is building something new, something unstoppable. Because in a world that sees people as disposable, he wrote the final line of code, and it said, "You don't get to win." Damon Ellis had built an empire digital complex elegant. At 42, he wasn't just the lead database architect at Nexura Labs, he was the quiet force behind a financial platform that moved over $2 billion a day, a fortress of zeros and ones that could outlast storms, hackers, and audits. But what it couldn't survive was the arrogance of succession. On a corner office overlooking Kansas City, Damon sat across from Roy Whitlow, his boss and co-founder of Nexura Labs, who now wore power like a costume. Gone was the startup partner. This version gestured proudly toward his 24-year-old daughter, Savannah, MBA fresh and scrolling her phone, as if her education could overwrite Damon's decades of work. "She's got ideas about modernization," Roy said, beaming Savannah. "Didn't even glance up. AI integration and cloud migration are trending, you guys feel ... dated." Damon's jaw didn't clench. His breath didn't hitch. "Always room for improvement," he said, but something had cracked back at his office. Damon stared at his architecture diagrams, the layered brilliance of his creation. Databases that handled trades, audits, insurance portfolios, and pension data. Secure, unbreachable, perfect. Hidden beneath those lines of code was something else. A secret. A kill switch. He'd installed it during a grueling audit years ago. Not sabotage, just protection. If anyone without proper clearance tried to tamper with the system's core framework, it would collapse, erasing itself. A clean slate rather than a corrupted legacy. That or now, the threat wasn't hypothetical. Things spiraled fast. First came the mandatory documentation reviews, then the cold meetings, the walk-bys from Whitlow without a glance. Then, Savannah's complaint about a security patch Damon applied without waiting for bureaucratic approval, a patch that took him 40 minutes to fix, one that may have saved the company from a serious breach. Then the email, subject, organizational restructuring, confidential, Savannah, Whitlow, chief database officer, Damon Ellis, consultant, knowledge transfer, period. It hit like frostbite. Damon checked the system logs. She had administrative access, full rights she didn't understand and would abuse without realizing it. They were replacing him with someone who thought SQL was an acronym for some juice cleanse, but they didn't understand the relationships in a database, the dependencies. You yank one piece without knowing what it's tethered to, and it all comes down. He closed the logs, then the laptop, then he went home early, for the first time in 12 years. Monday, the knowledge transfer meeting. Conference room B. Damon arrived early. Packets ready, flowcharts printed. Savannah strolled in 20 minutes late with a latte and weekend gossip. "So, like ... where do we start?" He tried, he did. 3 hours of explaining the basics: input systems, redundancy protocols, compliance regulations. "It's basically like a giant Excel sheet, right?" she asked. "Not exactly." By afternoon, Whitlow had called a meeting. "Savannah has concerns," he said. Damon looked at her. She was glued to her phone. "She says you're making it too complicated, using jargon to make her feel stupid." "Federal compliance isn't jargon," Damon said. "Maybe you could focus on high-level concepts," Whitlow said. "You know, management. Managing a database without understanding it is like piloting a plane because you've flown in one." Whitlow chuckled. "Systems can run themselves, Damon, only if they're built to protect themselves." Whitlow's eyes narrowed. Damon knew what came next. The subtle shove. The cold march to irrelevance. But he also knew what Savannah didn't, what Whitlow had forgotten. Those systems have guardians. And Damon had buried his legacy not just in the code, but in the decisions no one else had access to. Monday had been the start. The next 3 days would set the stage. He wasn't done yet, and neither was the system. "Modern perspectives," Whitlow had said, like it were a spell that could wipe away logic. "Maybe it's time to consider new approaches." New approaches. Damon nearly laughed. This was a system that processed over $2.3 billion in daily transactions, without a single day of downtime. New approaches sounded a lot like reckless reinvention, but he didn't laugh. He just asked, "What kind of new approaches?" Savannah beamed, finally engaged. "Well, for starters, I think we should implement blockchain, and maybe AI to automate the boring stuff." Damon blinked. AI automation had already saved the company $40 million under his watch. As for blockchain, that was like trying to rebuild an operating room with Lego blocks. But all he said was, "Those are interesting ideas. Have you researched the regulatory implications?" "Not yet," she chirped, "but I'm sure we can figure it out." She was sure she could figure out federal banking regulations. Damon returned to his office and collapsed into his chair. Across the street, construction workers were tearing down the bones of an old building to make room for a sleek new hotel. The metaphor wasn't lost on him. 2 days later, while backing up documentation, Damon noticed unusual activity in the server logs. Someone had been accessing administrative systems at odd hours midnight. For AM weekends. The credentials belonged to Todd Brennan. The key Todd's access shouldn't have reached the core database. Curious, Damon probed deeper. What he found chilled him. For weeks, Todd had been generating detailed architectural map security protocols, backup structures, even the hidden failsafe schematics. But the real shock came with a set of emails between Todd and an external firm, Zentra Global. They discussed legacy system modernization and knowledge extraction. It dated back 3 months. 3 months. They'd been planning his exit for 3 months. Damon kept digging. Procurement requests for new servers. Meetings about reducing single points of failure. That's what they called him. The final gut punch came from a presentation file tucked deep inside a folder labeled Strategic Planning 2024, Slide 12. Estimated cost savings from personnel reduction $180,000 annually. His salary. This wasn't about innovation. It was about accounting. Savannah wasn't a visionary. She was a discount replacement. They didn't even know what they were giving her. But she'd find out. Damon printed the presentation and took it to his car. Sitting in the underground garage, reading it again. They'd documented everything, every process he owned, every module he touched, every bit of logic he coded. Except one, the kill switch. It wasn't on any diagram. It didn't appear in audits. He built it when Nexora was young, when they feared being robbed by competitors. A failsafe meant to erase everything if tampered with. It didn't differentiate between internal and external threats. It only checked one thing: unauthorized modifications. Friday was the transition celebration. Cake, applause, empty praise. Thursday night, Damon stayed up with a brand new laptop, unconnected, untraceable. He reviewed the code he'd written years ago. Elegant, airtight. The failsafe would activate if someone without his biometric signature attempted to rewrite the core architecture. He could have disabled it. He didn't. Friday morning was gray and cold. Damon wore the tie his father gave him the day he graduated from Georgia Tech. His farewell would be professional. At 11 a.m. he scanned his fingerprint into the system one final time. All green. At 2 p.m. the celebration began. Whitlow spoke of new directions. Savannah of modernization. Todd handed him a plaque. At 3:30, Whitlow pulled him into the office. "We think it's time for you to move on." "I understand," Damon said. Savannah was already at his desk, poking at the system with the reckless joy of a child given access to an aircraft cockpit. "I think I'm getting the hang of this," she said. "I'm sure you'll do great," Damon replied. At 4:45 he left the building. At 5 o'clock Savannah attempted her first modification. At 5:02 the kill switch triggered. The call came at 5:17 p.m. Todd said breathlessly, "We have a situation." "What kind?" "The system is down. All of it. It's gone. We can't even access the error logs." "Have you tried recovery protocols?" Savannah was updating security settings, and then everything vanished. "I'm sure it's just a temporary glitch." "Did you check the backup center?" "Same errors. Everything's corrupted. $850 million in data. Gone." "Damon, please, you have to come in. I don't work there anymore. You're the only one who knows the system. I documented everything. Savannah should be fine," Todd begged. Damon declined. By Monday, it was in the papers: catastrophic failure at Nexera Labs, 47 clients affected. Investigations launched. Stock down 87%. Damon sipped his diner coffee and read the article. No mention of Savannah. No mention of Whitlow's betrayal. Just a tragic technical failure. His phone rang endlessly. He didn't answer. On Tuesday he drove downtown, watched people packing up. The building he'd built an empire in was crumbling. The food truck was gone. Empty. Streets. Empty dreams. By Wednesday, Nexera Labs was filing for bankruptcy. On Thursday, Damon started his new job. A private equity firm in Luxembourg. Tripled the salary. Full relocation. 5-year contract. They had found him. Some legacies die. Others evolve. Luxembourg was cold, quiet, and efficient. Everything Kansas City hadn't been in Damon's final days at Nexera Labs. He spent his first week onboarding with a multilingual HR team, meeting security analysts who respected protocol, and touring a glass-walled office that overlooked a river instead of a crumbling startup's parking lot. But the silence didn't last. He knew Nexera's meltdown wouldn't be contained. Financial ecosystems didn't just lose $850 million in data without consequences, and the consequences had a habit of echoing. By Friday, the headlines had shifted. First, whispers of internal sabotage. Then, speculation about insider threats. Analysts noted the eerie precision of the failure. Even the backup's redundant systems built to survive EMP attacks were rendered useless. Someone, somewhere, had engineered this. Damon's name came up in a tech blog first. A pseudonymous post on Devledger hinted at a legendary architect with a reputation for perfection and paranoia. The comments were worse: "If he designed it that way, he's a genius, or a psychopath, or both." Monday morning, Damon met with his new Employer's chief technology officer, a Belgian named Adrien de Vries, who spoke like a man who never asked the same question twice. They're calling it a digital extinction event, Adrien said, handing over a tablet. And we want you to analyze it quietly. Damon blinked. You want me to audit Nexera's collapse? Adrien nodded. Not officially. But if there's code in the wild that can do what your architecture did, we want to understand it. It wasn't a virus. Even better, tell me how it worked. Damon hesitated. Why do you think I know? Adrien smiled without warmth. Because nobody else could have built it. He spent the next 3 days reverse engineering a ghost, his ghost pulling code snippets from corrupted logs posted on GitHub by baffled engineers, piecing together bits of metadata leaked in technical forums. Even the formatting of the XML files was familiar at night. He dreamed of green terminal screens and whiteboards filled with cascading trees of logic, of Savannah's hand on his mouse, clumsily clicking, past warnings she didn't understand, of Whitlow's empty thanks, of a plaque now gathering dust somewhere in a box marked facilities. He didn't feel guilty. He felt clarity. They'd built Nexera with no failsafe against ego. He had Thursday. While staring at a blurred server map, he got a call. Blocked number, he answered. You win, Whitlow said. No introduction. Just those 2 words. Heavy as iron. Damon said nothing. You think I don't know it was you? You think the feds won't figure it out? Still silence. I built that company from scratch. You were just a kid with a laptop. Damon finally spoke. And yet the kid outlasted the company. You're not a hero, Damon. You're a traitor. He hung up. That night, Adrien called Damon into a private room. The walls were soundproof. The lights slightly dimmed. We want to buy it, Adrien said. Damon raised an eyebrow. Buy what? The protocol, the failsafe, whatever it was. You can name your price. I didn't bring it with me. We don't care. Rebuild it. Damon stared at the man. Across the glass window, he could see a server room humming with pristine order, not like Nexera's jumbled jungle. This place respected integrity. Logic. You want to make it part of your infrastructure. No, Adrien said. We want to own the next weapon in the digital age. You already proved it works. Weapon, that word. Next morning, Damon walked into the Luxembourg office's architecture lab. He found a clean machine, blank, unregistered. He opened a new shell window, typed the first lines of code, not for a weapon, not for revenge, for himself back in the States. The investigations mounted. The SEC launched an inquiry. Former Nexera clients filed lawsuits. Todd Brennan resigned and disappeared to Florida. Savannah deleted her LinkedIn account. Whitlow gave a desperate interview in which he blamed external sabotage and unknown foreign threats. But no one ever found the root cause. No one ever found the failsafe. Damon never denied it. He never confirmed it either. He just kept building. The days in Luxembourg turned quiet again, but this time it wasn't silence, it was focus. Damon worked in solitude. The company had given him everything he needed: equipment, autonomy, and anonymity. What he didn't have was peace. He stared at lines of code the way others stared at portraits of lost lovers. Some were familiar, others new, born from insomnia and the quiet conviction that something greater still needed building. Adrien kept his distance, respecting the boundaries between genius and agenda. But there were still visitors. One day it was a tall woman from Brussels in a navy suit who claimed to be from an international financial standards organization. She spoke in calm, measured tones and asked questions Damon refused to answer. Another day, it was a man with no business card, only a soft French accent and too much knowledge about Damon's past. But the visit that changed everything came not from Europe but America. Savannah Whitlow. She arrived without an appointment. The receptionist called up, clearly flustered. There's a Savannah Whitlow here to see you. She says it's urgent. Damon paused. Send her up. She stepped into his office. In black jeans and a trench coat, no longer the MBA protege who had once dismissed 12 years of work as outdated. Her face was pale, her voice was steady. I know it was you. Damon didn't deny it. I didn't come to beg, she added. I came to understand. He gestured for her to sit. She remained standing. You destroyed everything. My career, my father's company, our reputation. I didn't destroy anything, Damon said. I protected it from people who never cared how it worked. You call that protection? It was annihilation. No, Damon said. It was an autopsy. The body was already dead. They just hadn't noticed. For a moment, silence. Then, what happens now? He considered. That depends on what you do next. She left without another word. Damon returned to his shell window. The new protocol, he had decided, would not be a weapon, not in the traditional sense, not a switch to erase but to preserve. He called it Phoenix. Phoenix wouldn't destroy corrupted systems, it would isolate them, contain them, build bridges around them, allow recovery without surrender. It would be everything Nexera wasn't: transparent, accountable, resilient, and it wouldn't belong to anyone, not a company, not a country. He uploaded the base framework to an anonymous open-source platform under the name E62113. Within 48 hours it had 200 contributors. By the following week, cybersecurity blogs were calling it the most elegant recovery protocol ever written. No one traced it back to Damon. but everyone felt the ripple. Adrien called him 2 weeks later. We thought we were hiring a tool, Adrien said bluntly. Turns out, we hired a movement. Then fire me. Adrien shook his head. On the contrary, we're expanding your budget. Months passed. The lawsuits against Nexira's former board mounted. Whitlow was indicted for financial misrepresentation. Todd Brennan remained hidden. Savannah took a consulting role at a tech ethics firm, quietly, carefully. One cold afternoon, Damon received a package, no return address. Inside was a single item, the plaque he'd received on his final day at Nexora. Taped to the back was a note, in Savannah's handwriting. I didn't understand before. I do now. Damon placed the plaque on a shelf above his new workstation. Not as a trophy, not as a warning. As a reminder. Systems fail, people fail, but code, when written with care, endures. And sometimes, from the ruins, something better rises.